art has always been more of like a compulsion, I'd say. Like, it always feels like something that's happening to me instead of something I'm like willing to do. And so I've always just been creating little things, and basically, like, even with photography, someone gifted me a camera, and I got so excited just taking photos. And it wasn't until years later someone was like, "Oh, this is a photographer," and I was like, "I'm a photographer." It's like it didn't even dawn on me that I was a photographer. I was just so excited about doing it that it didn't really dawn on me. And then, I started the embossing pieces, and I don't know, I just kind of go wherever the excitement leads. And it's like, if I don't create, then I feel sick, and if I do, then I feel happy, and I don't really think about it too much, Like, some people, it's like you have to, like, they're like, oh, like, how do you get your concept? And it's like, to me, it's like I just have to do it. If I don't, I just feel sick, So for these embossing works, a lot of it is inspired by Braille, and I just thought it was so beautiful and minimal. And I started doing these embossing experiments with little bumps on paper, and I actually started working for a woman that's blind, and brought them to her one time, and she felt them, and she was like, "Oh, I love your work." And she could feel kind of the designs and stuff like that. And there was something really beautiful about that, where I was like, oh my gosh, like, if a blind woman loves my visual art, then I'm onto something. And even like my Mormon mom loves them, which is crazy because she doesn't like any of my photography. And so, yeah, it was just interesting. I felt like they were very universal. For a long time, I wanted to create something that was just very minimal. I think that my photography is a little bit more like maximalist and like punchy in a way, and I love that too. But I've always wanted to create something that was just truly minimal. And so, like, I was like painting with coffee instead of paint. Just like I wanted something so subtle and really beautiful. And I was like, how could I just go simpler and simpler? And then I think I got like a card that was embossed, and there was no ink. It was just like raised lettering. And it was something really special about it, where I was like, oh, like, I want to keep this card now because it's embossed, And I was like, that's so interesting. It's like a piece of paper, but when you emboss it, it's kind of magical. And then you're like, oh, I want to keep this forever. It's like there's something very special about an embossed piece of paper. And I feel like I'm just cranking that up as far as I can take it, and it's just like an overdose of texture and designs. And I love that there's no ink. It's actually called blind embossing is the technique. And I realized, like, oh, like, blind embossing is as minimal as you can get, because there's no ink. It's just form and shadow, and they're really fun to live with. Like, especially if you place them next to a window, as like the sun goes throughout the day, it's almost like a sundial, and so they look different throughout the day. There's like they're just fun to live with. I think for a while I was debating, do I do photography or do I do more of the embossing? And I've decided that I'm really interested in just continuing down the embossing realm for a little while. I started with just little marks on the paper, and then I started noticing that some would break through the paper, and I was like, and I'd throw them away. And then I started realizing I love that. And the way it breaks through is like, you can never control that. It like it'll kind of crack through the paper. And so I've just been cranking the pressure, of the press. There's like these big etching presses, so that it just breaks through in all these organic ways. And then I'm realizing I love that, and I want to push further into that. And so I think that's where it's going, is just I want them to become almost like more like let go of control in a certain way. And I was interviewed recently from a friend, and he was saying, you do photography, but you also and now you're doing these embossings. They seem so different. And I thought about it, and like while I was making the embossings, I realized they look different, but in a lot of ways they're almost the same, because a photograph is capturing a moment with light, and embossing is capturing a moment with pressure. And I just love that like within that moment of uniform pressure, like thousands of pounds of uniform pressure, like pressure behaves in very beautiful ways, and then paper has memory. And so you get to just like, if once it's framed, you can just look at that moment forever. Whereas, so the paper has memory with the embossing, and with photography, the chemical on the paper has memory. And so it's just capturing a moment in a different way.